Bandwidth for Changelog is provided by Fastly. Learn more at fastly.com. We move fast and fix things here at Changelog because of Rollbar. Check them out at rollbar.com. And we're hosted on Linode servers. Head to linode.com/changelog. This episode is brought to you by Rollbar. Move fast and fix things. Resolve errors in minutes and deploy with confidence. Head to rollbar.com/changelog. Request a demo. Get started today. It's loved by developers, trusted by enterprises, and most of all, we use it here at Changelog. Move fast and fix things with Rollbar. Once again, rollbar.com/changelog. Welcome to JS Party, a weekly celebration of JavaScript and the web. Tune in live on Thursdays at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern at changelog.com/live. Join the community and Slack with us in real time during the shows at the changelog.com/community. Follow us on Twitter. We're at JSPartyFM. And now on to the show.
All right, everyone. Welcome all to another JS Party. And we'd like to clear the stage right up front and just say this is not, and I repeat, not a JavaScript party. Do you hear me, Oracle's lawyers? This is a JS party, and we're not interested in any ceases or any desists. So, JS party, thank you very much.
The Jerod Santo party.
Oh, yes, that does sound nice. Welcome to my party. My name is Jerod Santo. I'm joined today by three awesome panelists. Nick Nisi, who probably crawled out from underneath a pile of conference talks to be here with us. Nick, what is up, my man?
That is correct. Yes. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Tell the people how many conference talks we have to go through by, what is it, Monday or Tuesday of next week?
By Tuesday, we have 160 conference talks to go through.
And how many have you read so far?
Whoa.
I have read 9.
9. So that's 9 more than I have.
I do not envy you your weekend.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just procrastinating for as long as I possibly can, and then I'll hate myself later. Safia Abdalla also here. Safia, it looks like you've been curling up with the curl code base lately.
I have. Not just for the punny effect of it with all this cold weather we're having in Chicago, but I've been reading the curl code base and writing code anthropology blog posts about it. Actually just finished writing tomorrow's blog post a couple of minutes ago, so stay tuned for that.
Very cool. We did a show with Daniel Stenberg. I think it was 17 years of curl, and he told us all about his history with curl, and we're actually having him back on the changelog sometime this year because he's now celebrating his 20th birthday. Not his 20th, curl's 20th birthday, which is pretty amazing for what is almost completely a one-man show in terms of the bulk of the code. So very cool. We also have Kevin Ball here. Kevin, I listened back last week and I realized that Suze was referring to you as K-Ball, and I wasn't. I was calling you Kevin, and so now I feel like I was dissing you somehow. Is K-Ball what we should call you from now on, or is Kevin cool? What do you like to be called?
Well, I'm more and more going by K-Ball professionally. There's 20 million Kevins out there. And I introduce myself as Kevin, and 5 minutes later, somebody says, hey, what was your name again? But if I say K-Ball, people remember me. So go with K-Ball.
K-Ball it is. Yeah, I also noticed when I try to mention you on Twitter from like the JS Party FM, and I start typing out even KB or Kevin, there's a gazillion of them. So I feel your pain there.
But only one K-Ball.
That's right. And we got him. We got him here with us. So super excited. Today's big topic. First of all, I'm going to tell you what it's not. It's not personal digital assistants. Remember those? Those are PDAs. It's not NWA, which is widely considered to be one of the greatest and most influential groups in the history of hip-hop music. It's not NDAs or FriendDAs. Please don't do those. It's not the NRA, the NBA, the PBA, the PBS, TBS, CBS, or even TBN. Those are all TLAs, but they are not today's topic. That is PWAs, aka Progressive Web Apps. Now, I know what the listeners might be thinking, especially if you're hardcore and you've been listening to JS Party all the way back to episode 4, which is when we had a show about PWAs. And yes, go back and listen to that. Alex, Michael, and Rachel did a great job. But this is a different time, different panel, and things have changed with PWAs. So we're here to talk about them today. And K-Ball, this was your idea. So I'm going to tee it off to you to go ahead and get us started, probably with the definition, and then we'll just go from there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first I want to say, why have things changed? And the reason is it's no longer just Google, right? Back in the day, it was Google pushing this with Chrome. But now Safari's added support. Microsoft is treating PWAs as first-class citizens. So there's a whole new world when it comes to PWA. So PWA means progressive web app, and it's kind of similar to thinking about progressive enhancement, where you're adding things on, in design. You would progressively enhance with JavaScript or things like that, except here it's talking about the network. So you want something that's going to function in some form, even without a network connection or with a very slow network connection, and then scale up to be a full featured web connected application.
So there's certain aspects of it which I guess are required. I mean, the PWA designation, first of all, is somewhat of a marketing term, or it's a loosey-goosey thing, right? It's not, there's checklists and stuff, but it's not like you're going to go and like be like npm install PWA or something like that. And like, it's loosier than that, right? Oh yeah, it's much looser. And, as we'll talk about, each one of the different platforms treats them a little bit differently, but there are some required features. You got to have service workers, which are super cool, even independent of the rest of this, and something worth talking about and diving into. You got to be running over HTTPS, so it's got to be secure, same origin, all these things tied into that. And then you need to have a manifest file, which is what makes your web application, quote unquote, installable. It describes it. It's similar to what you'd ship in if you've ever built like a browser extension or a native app where you have a manifest file that says, this is what this thing is. Here's where it lives. Here's what the images are that you would use to show it on your home screen, things like that.
Can you talk a little bit about how these three things evolved to be the quote-unquote required features? Like, what was the process for designating that if you wanted to be called a progressive web app, you had to do at least these three things? That's
a great question. I don't know the behind the scenes on that. And one thing to remember is these things really started with Google pushing this as something where they wanted these, Google, there's been this back and forth over time between Google and Apple saying, web focus versus native app focus. And Google started pushing these as a way to bridge the gap. Now, I can give you my ideas for why those are the required ones. Service workers are kind of the minimal thing that you need in order to be able to function offline. They provide essentially a cache and proxy functionality where you can say, okay, something that would go out to the web can store cached data and serve that up if it doesn't have a web access. HTTPS is saying, well, we need these things to be secure if we want to treat them as native applications, that people need to be able to trust them in the same way. And the manifest is what gives you accessibility to sort of put something on the home screen and have it be installed. So those would be my thinking as to why those are the required sets, but I don't know the reasoning that went behind that.
I think that the actual first iteration of this kind of came from Apple in the first iPhone release, where the iPhone didn't really have an app store and there was no way to create native apps. And Steve Jobs' vision was HTML5 and Web 2.0 all the way for that. And so you could, from the very first iPhone, install essentially a bookmark to the home screen. And it was nothing like what they are today. But it was a way to kind of have that app-like functionality, being able to extend the OS without doing that. And then Apple really did nothing with that for years.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's good that Google has kind of picked that up and coined the term, and with these technologies really made it possible to have more of a native-like experience from just the web.
I remember when they announced that, and it was like at the end of WWDC keynote, I believe, and they said something like, we got a really sweet solution for you. And everybody was pining to do apps on the iPhone, because I think it was the second round iPhone 3G, perhaps. Or maybe there was the original iPhone, perhaps. And I think with the iPhone 3G, maybe is when the App Store launched. But I don't remember the history, but I do remember him saying we got a really sweet solution. And he said web apps, basically, right? HTML. And the crowd just deflated as he said that. And that's because the technology sucked back then. I mean, the amount of memory in the phone was so much that if you had a few open Safari tabs, they would refresh all the time. Like, you couldn't really do it back then. And things have progressed, and Google's definitely pushed it.
Yeah, so I was just going to clarify, not just for myself, but for the audience. But when you hear or you see a headline that says, Safari just added support for PWAs, what that's really saying is Safari added features to the browser that would aid in the development of PWAs, things like maybe an API to access the cache or service worker support and things like that.
Yeah, they turned on service workers is basically what it means.
Yeah, and very silently. They didn't even have an announcement about that in the release notes or anything.
I'm having trouble phrasing this question, but, is there a proactive effort behind the addition of these features, or do you think Apple is just trying to catch up with Google? Do you think there's a future for PWAs on iOS?
If you look at the drawbacks that iOS imposes, they have a really awkward install flow. They don't let you do the same. Google lets you, basically show a banner to install your, if you're on a website that is PWA, you can install it right there. And they don't have any way for you to do that. You have to know to click to share and then go to bookmark it, essentially like that old style. They don't support push notifications. They don't give you access to a bunch of the APIs that Android does. And they have some pretty weird limitations on data and uninstalling data if you haven't used it for a while. So my sense is they haven't fully bought in. And I don't know exactly why they've done anything in that. It's probably pressure from the web world. Safari has kind of become the IE6 of modern browsers in a lot of ways. Like, they're lagging behind on so many dimensions. And so they're probably feeling a lot of pressure there. I know someone who works on their browser team. I haven't talked to her in years, but she was very, very adamant about web standards and pushing. So I'm sure that their engineers have a lot of desire to make this happen, but it doesn't seem to be a company priority.
So do you think that because iPhones and iOS are such popular devices with, I don't want to say the mass market, because I think iPhones are specifically popular in the West. But do you think the fact that there hasn't been a proactive effort to push PWAs by Apple is like the average Joe and Jane aware of PWAs? Is this something that has reached the point where like the average consumer knows that they can use a web app?
I wouldn't think so. Kind of to what K-Ball was saying with the awkwardness of even being able to install it. And if you look at some of the PWAs that example apps out there and like real PWAs like Twitter Lite and Lyft and others, Apple will still show you the banner for installing the native app at the top of the screen, but there's no indication of really how to install the PWA, and so it's very awkward. I don't think that kind of like what was mentioned. I just don't think that they're fully bought into it yet, and so I think it's still an uphill battle for that.
How challenge us to think about even ourselves, like let alone mainstream mobile users. But how about, tech developer-y, nerdy mobile users? I know what PWAs are, and I have 0 installed on my phone. How about you guys? Am I an anomaly, or is it still it's still like burgeoning but hasn't arrived?
After service workers were supported in iOS, I installed Twitter Lite just to play with it and see what it's like. And I've had it on my phone ever since, and I occasionally play with it, but I mostly use Tweetbot, so it's just more of a curiosity rather than something that I actually use every day.
Yeah, I don't use them. Though this kind of brings up an interesting point of, what is the audience for which these things really make sense? And even looking at, Satya pointed out, iOS is very much a Western phenomenon. You're talking the US and Western Europe are the ones where iOS has gotten huge penetration. But even in that audience, the behavior of folks on iOS devices versus Android devices is very different, right? Like, there's documented, studies showing that folks will install way more applications on iOS. They're more willing to pay for things, all of these different pieces. And so they may not be the market for PWAs. If I think about the folks that I interact with on a regular basis, the young man who's the most excited about PWAs lives in India, because you have this vast market of folks who are using slow connections, who are using either very low-end Android phones or feature phones, who don't have space. And like if you dig through, one of the big benefits of a PWA is it's way smaller to install than a native application, but way less bandwidth intensive than a web application. And so you can target those folks who just don't have the data and the bandwidth to play with.
I think that's a very good point. One of the things that I'm thinking of, like, I don't have any of them installed on my phone, but yet Safari, like mobile Safari on iOS, is probably like my top used app behind maybe Mail, right? Or maybe Tweetbot. But I live inside Safari tabs. And aren't these, I mean, because PWA is very much like a progressively enhanced thing and it's an opt-in to certain things, a lot of these features and some of it's really just even techniques are still hugely beneficial, regardless of whether or not we're going to hit install to home screen, right? You can still benefit your users without the last mile of getting your icon on their desktop.
That's a great point. I don't know if it was K-Ball or Nick who was just discussing their friend in India who had an interest in PWAs, but that reminded me of when I visited my hometown, which was probably when PWAs were really popular. This must have been like 2013, 2012 maybe. And I'm from Sudan, so pretty rural area. There's internet access, but it's not like super fast or anything, and people tend to usually have like Android phones. And one of the most popular ways for accessing things like Instagram and Facebook was mobile applications. Or sorry, not mobile applications, responsive mobile web-based apps. So you're right. It was a similar thing where people don't really make the jump to, I'm going to add this to my home screen and treat it like an app. It still very much resides within Safari or Chrome or whatever mobile browser they're using. But I think just the fact that, for me, it seems like progressive web apps are less a technology as much as it is a way of forcing developers to think about design and programming in a certain way and under certain constraints.
This episode is brought to you by the O'Reilly Fluent Conference. Make your plans now to attend Fluent in San Jose, California, June 11th through June 14th to learn the latest JavaScript tools and methods. Be part of what past attendees call, quote, a great center for modern web development and disruption, and, quote, the best place to see the current state of the web. Use the discount code JSParty to save 20% on most passes. Learn how to build a better web with better user experiences at O'Reilly Fluent Conference. Head to fluentconf.com to learn more and register.
So Safia, you mentioned a set of methodologies, and as we've said a few times, progressively, you can dip your toe in the water and then add more of these features, which make the mobile experience of a web app better. Let's talk about then what makes like a minimally viable PWA. For instance, we have changelog.com. It's very much a content-focused site, but you can be signed in, and there's lots to it. And we've had people ask, specifically one fella, even in our GitHub issues, say, hey, can you make this a PWA? And I just said, sure. I don't really know. What do I have to do to have answered that in the affirmative? And so let's start there, and then we can build from there.
So Google has a checklist that you can go through to say that. Now, I don't know if all of that is required for a minimum PWA, but it's a starting point.
Well, we talked about the required features, service workers, HTTPS, and a manifest. So we're already on HTTPS, so I guess checkbox 1. When you just say service workers is a required feature, What does that mean? Because a service worker is a generic API. You can use it for lots of stuff, right? What do you have to do with a service worker? Just invoke one or install one and you've got a PWA? Is that helpful? Or is it about offline caching? What's it about?
I think it's really about providing some sort of interactive experience while you're offline. So, if we were to take the changelog.com example, is this being rendered, like, is this either a static HTML, or when you're logged in, is it acting basically as a single page app, or is it hitting the server for every request to render HTML?
It hits the server every time.
My feeling is we'd probably need to re-architect that a little bit, and at least to have, you could do something lightweight where you're actually, hitting the server from a shell that pulls in the HTML. But basically, you need some way to have an experience when there's no access to the server. And the service worker is what gives you that, because the service worker is basically, an inline proxy, something that is getting between your page, your app, and the API that can then cache things. So you could have a minimalistic experience that has your user info and, say, the last set of updates or whatever that was there cached, so that they have something to show you if there's no network connection.
Yeah, while K-Ball was just talking, I thought it would be fun to head over to changelog.com and run
That's always
Lighthouse. It's always fun. Lighthouse is the little automated tool that the Google team made that basically runs through the checklist of like PWA type things to see how you measure up.
Are you sure you don't want to run this on Zarf instead? I mean, this might be embarrassing for me.
Zarf is pretty good. There's a service where it's like decent.
All right, tear us apart. What are we doing here?
I'll start with what you performed best in and then go down. So there's a section on the Lighthouse checklist for best practices, and you all scored an 81% on that.
It's a B minus, right?
Yeah, that's, you're not going to get grounded for that, so that's fine.
Okay, good.
So it looks like there's 3 things that it complained about. 4 browser errors were logged onto the console, not using HTTP2 for resources, and something about a manifest short name that was truncated when displayed on home screen.
I have no idea what that means.
That's the name that, like, if changelog was like the awesome changelog website, if that was the title of this page, short name would be what is actually displayed on the home screen when you add it to a home screen on Android or iOS. Actually, I don't know if iOS does use that, but iOS allows you to change that, whereas Android, I think, doesn't.
Is that just a meta tag, basically?
It goes in the manifest.json.
Okay.
You did really good on SEO. You got an 80%. Good job. There were just some links, I guess, that didn't have all the proper metadata.
Okay.
75% on accessibility. Some things didn't have labels and color contrast. Progressive web app is 55%.
Whoa! Well, I've
grounded.
never. That's not grounded. That's failing. It just flunked.
Like, you gotta repeat.
You got a grade on a curve.
That's right. We got to remember that we haven't been trying for that. So, this is like a starting point for us. We can get better.
So I'll discuss some of the things that it says you did right. Congrats for using HTTPS and for redirecting all HTTP traffic to HTTPS.
Thank you.
That was a plus. You've got page load that is fast enough on a 3G network. So woot for that.
Nice.
It says that you've also got a valid tag set up on like the viewport meta tag thing where you set it to like initial scale or whatever. I'm not making any sense, but I think people might know what I'm talking about. And content is sized correctly for the viewport. So I guess that's saying it's responsive. And it says contains some content when JavaScript is not available. So I guess it loads all right. That makes sense. You failed because you did not register a service worker. So that's what K-Ball was talking about earlier. Does not respond with HTTP status code 200 when offline. You don't prompt the user to install the web app. It's not configured with a custom splash screen. And the address bar does not match brand colors. which can be done, I guess, with the
Address
theme
bar.
color meta tag.
That's like super PWA, right? Or like we got our address bars matching our brand colors. Actually, that's the kind of thing Adam probably be into. So we should probably look into that.
And it's got a nifty thing here also on this Lighthouse tool that says, things you might want to check manually, which is, does your site work cross-browser? Do page transitions work smoothly? Does each page have a URL? So are things deeply linkable? So yeah, this is a cool tool. You did all right.
Well, thank you. We got some real-time follow-up from the chat. Corbin points out that he ran it on google.com. Now, that's like one of the best websites in the world, I hear. Google.com gets 55 as well on their progressive web app scoring. And so we're at least in decent company. Isn't this their idea?
Does anyone listening work at Google and want to explain?
Yeah, that's the pot calling the kettle black, I believe. So
Well, Google is targeting Android, right? And they bake search in, so they don't care. Search is already baked into all these mobile. What is interesting there, though, is so that's highlighting like bullet point by bullet point, but it's not necessarily giving us any sense of like how much of an architectural change would be needed to make it work, right? Like if your site is architected on this idea of everything is going back to the server to pull content, it's not clear that that's going to be, even if you're getting a reasonably score everywhere but service workers, I'm not sure if that's going to be an easy implementation to do. Like, could we just put a service worker that caches HTML content? I don't know if that's sufficient.
Yeah, I don't know either. And the question becomes, is there a certain, because we're basically a content site, right? So, think of changelog.com. For those who haven't been to the website for a while, of course, all of our podcasts are hosted well. We also have our homepage is filled with news items, right? Which is, think of it like a really amazing, like the best ever link blog, right? Besides what I've seen previously, what else could I cache and provide offline that would be of any use to somebody without hitting our server? There's really not much else there. Maybe recent episodes I've listened to, but now you're taking up, 100 megs of space. So maybe, there's certain things like Let's Encrypt, right? HTTPS. Everybody should have HTTPS websites, but should everybody have PWAs? That's, I guess, the bigger question. Or is it for a certain class of things?
Good question. Well, and some of it comes back to what Sasha was saying about this not being just about something that we can, handle offline behavior, but better performance, better interaction, right? Like if you can use a service worker to cache, most recent content and all your JavaScript and CSS or something like that, you can provide somebody something that feels like it's ready instantly. Even if to interact with it, you're going to need to go back to the server, right? It's going to be something that has a much better interaction paradigm for somebody who's on a slow network connection.
Fair enough. So what, aside from getting content when your connection is slow, that's basically the baseline here with service workers. The other big aspect of it is access to the home screen. Now, there are certain people, we have an article that we linked up to recently called I Built a PWA and Published It into 3 app stores. Here's what I learned. And basically what they learned was it took a lot of work, specifically not building the PWA took a lot of work, but dealing with all the different app stores took a lot of work.
And particularly Apple.
Yes, particularly Apple. Is access to the app stores the carrot for these, or is it just the homepage?
Well, for everything but iOS, there's more than that, right? It's not just the app store, but like if you install one of these things on Android, you get access to speech recognition APIs. You get access to other native functionality. I think you get access to Bluetooth, a couple other things. If you install one of these things on Windows via the Microsoft Store, you actually get first-class access to tons of Microsoft-specific APIs, even though this thing was built as a web page. So it can get you access to a lot of other pieces. You can get push notification access, the ability to push notifications onto the device, which is huge for folks who are doing mobile marketing. That's one of the big pushes for get people to install an app so I can push junk to them. It's not great for consumers necessarily, but if they're done tastefully, that's valuable. All those things are available for devices that are not iOS.
So I'm curious to know, K-Ball, it seems like a lot of the special features that you mentioned when it comes to something being a PWA on a mobile app is having access to like these phone capabilities. So if you had let's say you were consulting with a company and they came to you with their app that was like, I don't know, some like sort of like web-based responsive app, and they were like, oh, we want to make this a PWA. What would you look for in their app's functionality or their code base where you would be like, you need to right away do these 3 things that would push you towards getting a PWA? Or would you say, no, you're not really going to benefit that much from adding service workers to your app?
The first thing I'd look for is the same thing I'd look for in somebody who was thinking to package up a web app using PhoneGap or something like that, or Cordova, which is what it's called now, which is essentially, do you have a clean separation between your front end and your back end? Is there a well-defined set of APIs that you're calling to get data and your rendering is happening on the front end, or is it fuzzy? A lot of older applications, they may have pieces that are behaving kind of in a single page app fashion, but they're also loading data they kind of render up an HTML page that also includes this app, and they do that to handle authentication and various other things. If you've got that kind of intermingling, it's going to be a little bit more of a pain to separate things out and make it feel clean. Whereas if you've got a clean separation and you're already handling authentication and all of your API calls expecting that your front end is separated cleanly from your back end, it's going to be a lot simpler to put in a caching layer, to put in something separate, to basically treat this thing as something that will work offline. That's already when I look at folks who are saying, hey, I want to package up a Cordova app, that's the first thing I look for, is like, how well separated are your front end and your back end? There's architectural questions about how are you fetching data. Something I haven't had the chance to play around with that much, but I think makes for some very interesting things here is, are you using a GraphQL-based fetch where your backend is essentially just serving up exactly what you want? Or are you using a more REST-based approach where you're fetching resources and kind of keeping track of those? My intuition is it might be easier to do a true caching layer if you're fetching all the resources in a different way, but that might be just because I haven't fully wrapped my head around what GraphQL enables. The reason I go there is because I think in GraphQL, you're fetching exactly what you want right now, which is great. But if you want to provide sort of a full experience, that what you want is going to change over time. So you'd have to think ahead of time, okay, what's my base set? Okay, fetch that, make sure I cache that. Now that I'm talking that out, I don't know that would actually be any harder. But would be something to look at, is like, what is the structure of the API that this thing is talking to? And does it make for something that's going to be easily cacheable?
So we have a few example apps out there, which are bigger websites that usually have native apps. Some of them still do. Twitter, the big one, right, which has Twitter Lite and still has the Twitter mobile app for iOS and I believe Android, although I think they sunsetted the Mac app, which was a shame because, well, it was in disrepair anyhow. But we have Twitter Lite. Pinterest now has a PWA, and they recently released some metrics that says that their engagement on the Pinterest PWA has beaten their previous web experience, and then they said as well as their native app engagement, which seems pretty compelling if it's true. I don't know why they would say if it wasn't true, but it seems almost unbelievable that it was more engaging than their native app. Has anybody used these? Nick, you mentioned that you had Twitter Lite installed, and would you be happy with this instead of your Tweetbot or your Twitter? I guess Tweetbot would be an unfair comparison, but your Twitter.app on your phone?
Definitely. Aside from not being able to get like push notifications, which actually could be a feature, it's a pretty nice experience. Really, it's a little weird when you install it. Safia installed it during the break and ran into the same issues that I had installing it over again, with it just not really working right away. And also the apps, specifically, I'm just talking specifically on iOS, it's still not not quite there yet on iOS. It does feel like a native app once it's installed and actually I'm logged in and running. It's very smooth, very quick to do things, to navigate around, to tweet and do all of that. But it doesn't really have any integration with the rest of iOS at all. So any kind of external links are going to be thrown into a different app, or thrown into Safari. And then there's no way to really get back to Twitter Lite from Safari without having to go back. There's no, it's not going to open twitter.com in that PWA. So it doesn't feel at home yet on iOS, but it is nice. I do like the idea that you can just go to the app in Safari and kind of try it before you install it. So you don't really have to do all of that. That's probably one of the biggest benefits of PWAs.
That's a really interesting point. It reminds me of something that a gentleman named Kieran Farr was talking about with WebVR, and why WebVR was a substantially better platform than native VR, because it lets you engage progressively. It lets you start and see some of the experience and then get a little bit deeper and then get a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper. And PWAs have the potential, at least, to give us that same thing for mobile applications. I can start, I play with it on the web, then I get a little bit deeper and give it some permissions and install it. And it feels as good as native in theory, or it could get there. But I was able to try that out ahead of time and not have to commit and give it a whole bunch of permissions up front and all whatever stuff.
Right. And an added benefit, you didn't have to download a 70 megabyte app to do anything with it. You could just download exactly what you were playing with, and then once you decided to install it, then you get to download everything else, but you don't have to do that up front.
The size thing is big too. Like I was just glancing as you're talking through the Pinterest study, and they compare the size of an Android app download about 10 megabytes, iOS 56, and the PWA, when you first install it, it's 150K. And it'll progressively load resources as it needs it.
That's a huge difference. It is.
And if you're on like a feature phone or something like that, where you have a few megabytes of memory, you're not even on one of these smartphones, like going back to our thing about the audience, huge parts of the developing world are still on feature phones with barely any space.
Hey everyone, I'm Tim Smith, senior producer here at Changelog. You know how important it is to stay in the know, and our weekly newsletter helps you and thousands of other developers do exactly that. It's the developer news that matters, nothing more and nothing less. Visit changelog.com and subscribe today.
So we're definitely seeing some specific use cases where a PWA makes tons of sense. And then we're seeing other places where it's like, well, you could benefit from certain features. And we all agree that giving offline access or providing a cursory user experience to people who haven't gotten, the full access to our data yet is a win all around. But thinking about like what's really the sweet spot for PWAs, it seems like Pinterest may have found one. The Twitter Lite app makes a whole bunch of sense. I was thinking more about like what could changelog.com be that's different than just a feed of links. And I was thinking on the audio side now, one app which is on most people's phones is a podcast player. And so I guess my question to the panel would be, would it be weird or would it be appropriate? Like maybe you go to changelog.com website and it is what it is, like it's news up front. But when you say, install to home screen or whatever you do, or maybe even in the app stores, when you install it, it's a different experience. Like maybe it's a podcast player that has, just changelog network shows, but you could prefetch them. You could say, save this for offline. You could create queues, which would be local. I guess, first of all, would that be off-putting to have like two separate experiences, or is that something people are doing? And then secondly, with limitations on the phone, I don't know what the cache, like how much data could we download? I just want to open that up for your guys' thoughts.
Well, I already use the podcast app, and I think a lot of folks do, but what I don't get through that is the live stream. So what might be neat is, hey, pull this thing down, and suddenly I've got, live stream capability that can do more in terms of prefetch or do whatever. Maybe it's not quite live, but it's slightly behind live and then stores it. You could have, right now you have to log on live at that time to get the unfiltered and hear us joking around about rap and things like that. But maybe with the app, you get that for the rest of the day or something.
That's a good idea. Would it be a super weird experience to have like a website and then when you say install to homepage, it's like a different thing altogether? Or would that be welcomed by people, do you think?
I feel like it would be such a weird experience for the transition from a web app running on Safari to a progressive web app on my home screen to be different. So like on the break, I installed Pinterest, which as I'm scrolling through it now, I realized was a really bad decision because I think I might have a new addiction. But I had the same experience I had with Twitter where I like signed up for a Pinterest account and then like set up my account and whatever. And then I went and did the save to screen thing. And what I was expecting in like a dream universe was basically everything I was doing in the browser would now be in an app on my screen and I could switch and I'd be like on my feet again and ready to rock and roll. But then it didn't work. I couldn't log in. Weird things are happening. Everything's breaking. The universe is terrible. So yeah, that experience, and the same with Twitter where it wasn't a seamless jump into the app from the web application, kind of just turned me off a little bit because I was expecting something more.
Maybe there's like an uncanny valley.
Yeah, maybe it's the language of that Apple uses where it says add to home screen. When I think about that, it feels like I'm like adding whatever I was just doing to the home screen. Like it shouldn't be different. It's just like almost a way to organize it. I don't know. Am I making sense?
Do you think that could be a limitation of iOS and the way that PWAs are currently treated?
Yeah, I should add that this is my experience on a iPhone 6S running iOS that's like very old and has been through a lot. My negative experiences thus far with both the Twitter PWA and the Pinterest PWA might just be my bad luck. But sans what device I was on, if I was, turning something into an app on my home screen, I expect the experience to be the same. I feel like as a user, one of the reasons I use a computer is because I can reliably get the same information and experience every time I log on, and there's like no surprises.
I think that makes sense. And coming back to the point that was being made at the end of the last segment, you kind of want this to be progressive. You want it to kind of draw you further and further into the experience. So I don't think you'd necessarily want to take away functionality, but you might add more functionality.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. You don't want to jolt people out of what their expectations are, right? Principle of least surprise and all that, where you'd be like, surprise, now we're a podcast app. And it's like, wait a second. I just wanted to change log on my desktop. We may be suffering a little bit here from lack of diversity in mobile device usage as K-Ball, I'm not sure about you, but I think the rest of us are on iOS as
Me
our
too.
daily drivers. Yeah, you are. So we're 4 for 4 there. So we're not representing Android's experience very well. I guess we'll have to just apologize for that. And then maybe move on to something completely different, which is Microsoft's implementation. K-Ball, tell us about what's going on with the Microsoft Store there.
Yeah, so that was something that was pretty interesting is Microsoft published a post saying, hey, welcome PWAs to the Microsoft Store. And they have the ability for any progressive web app to be a first-class citizen in the store. You discover it in the store, you find it. They are adding things automatically. So they're scraping the web. They already do that for Edge. They're scraping the web, and if they find something as a PWA that scores highly or whatever, they will add it automatically to their store to be discovered there. And they also let you submit things in sort of the standard way. And what they do is they say, if you install through the store, then your PWA gets treated as a first-class citizen by Windows. They inject a whole bunch of Microsoft-specific APIs into your global JavaScript scope. So suddenly you can access all of these guts, deep in the guts pieces of Windows through JavaScript, and essentially do anything that any other app in the Microsoft ecosystem can. It's different than the approach that Google has taken with Android, where they also expose a bunch of things, but they've kind of tried to go through the standards bodies and say, hey, we're going to create a standard for how you access push notifications. There's a push API. We're going to create a standard for how you access voice recognition and then implement that in Chrome and what have you. Microsoft is basically saying, you know what? We'll just throw all of our APIs that are already implemented at you. And if you want to use them, you can.
Now, one of the things that this conversation jogged my memory about Microsoft supporting PWAs is PWA support on Chromebooks with Chrome OS. I own a sad little Chromebook that I use sometimes for writing and stuff.
Why is it sad?
You know, he's got 32 gigabytes of storage space, 2 gigabytes of memory. He's like the baby of the computer family.
Yeah, have you used a Chromebook? They're kind of sad.
Are they? I've never used one.
Yeah, I use them exclusively for writing.
Do you do that because the platform constrains you to only writing because it can't do much else, or why do you do that?
Oh, I do it because my big distraction in life, if I can't write or do anything, is to code. So since I can't really code on a Chromebook, I know some people do, but I personally don't. It forces me to concentrate on writing.
Ooh, I had to do that once, code on a Chromebook. It was an interesting experience.
Sad.
So what I ended up doing, I mean, I run all my development. I'm kind of old school, so I do all my development in the terminal. I use Tmux and Vim through everything.
Yes.
So what I ended up doing is setting up a virtual server with an environment and just using the Chromebook to SSH in. And so then most of my dev environment was just normal because I'm using Vim and Tmux the same way I would otherwise. However, debugging was a pain in the ass and dealing with assets because suddenly any sort of local asset, I've got to figure out how do I get it up to my virtual server? And if it's not quite right, how am I going to manipulate it and tinker with it? And that was where I really felt the pain.
I've been considering a setup like that for streaming because when I live code on Twitch, my laptop starts on fire because it's doing all the things. And I'm like, and specifically, like our app is in Elixir, and so that's a compiled language to Erlang, and like compilation times, which are normally like milliseconds, I don't even notice them when I'm live streaming and my video is doing its thing and my network is doing its thing. All of a sudden, compile times take forever, and so now people are watching me live code, and we're like, nah, we're going to compile this, and we're going to sit here and twiddle our thumbs. So I was like, I need some sort of like remote box that's actually doing the heavy lifting. And go back. I'm a terminal guy as well, although not as big of a Vim fan as you and Nick are. But I need some sort of setup like that. Now, I wouldn't do a Chromebook, but I'm just thinking of a remote coding setup that I could use. So
for those who are interested in Chromebooks for like productivity type stuff, I Googled around, and it looks like in response to Microsoft supporting PWAs on their desktop, Google started adding support for PWAs on Chrome OS, and it's under a feature flag, but it looks like you can do most of the same things, like adding it to your shelf. It auto-detects when something is a PWA, like the Starbucks app, looks like is the example they're referencing. So it's interesting to see this not just happening on mobile, where we think of it, but also on the desktop. It's kind of cool.
Well, let's round out this conversation by getting big picture perhaps again and seeing if we can have any real actionable takeaways. And so I guess I would start that conversation with this question. Does what we've either discussed or for some of us like myself have learned today about the new state of support for PWAs and really the benefits of them, does this compel us in any way to change our day-to-day development practices, or is Safia going to go back to Zarf and install a manifest file if there isn't one? Like, what are we going to do in response to this? And then maybe as a bigger question is, what should our fellow developers be doing now with regard to these things?
Yeah, so I do have a service worker running on Zarf right now. It's like not the most robust thing in the world, but there are some ways that I can think of improving the progressive web app experience on Zarf that have been on my to-do list for a long time. And most of them don't deal with any of the things that we discussed explicitly. A lot of them are just about improving page load performance and like improving time to like first meaningful paint and first interaction and things like that. Those are the big priorities for me. And I wouldn't say that they're like new priorities. There's things I knew of had to do for a while, but haven't had the chance to get around to them. But now I'm reprioritizing them.
I haven't really worked on any client work that where service workers or progressive web apps were really necessary. And I haven't really personally dug into them because they haven't been available on iOS, and I've run iOS forever personally. But now that they are there, I think that I would, that I'm definitely going to be on the lookout for potential ways to incorporate some of the features, if not all of them, in the future, on future things that I work on.
Maybe you could get nejsconf.com as an offline available, like, so you can have the schedule even if you have your Wi-Fi turned off.
That would be really cool. Actually, that's a perfect example.
Yeah, especially because conferences are the worst place for internet access, right? Like it's usually almost always Wi-Fi problems. And so then everybody's is on Verizon or AT&T's network. And so those are bogged down as well.
That's really funny. There's that app that, gosh, I can't remember the name of it now, but it's basically like a JS fiddle for React Native, and it lets you do that. I've seen examples of conference apps written in that so that you can install it, basically sideloading outside of the App Store, but a progressive web app would be much better.
Yeah, because don't make me install something. That's just my attitude towards things, unless it's like a daily use thing for a drive-by use case. Like, let me go to a website. And again, going back to that conversation of like getting, not just progressively adding features, but as a user, like what do we say, slowly introducing it to you. Like I honestly love just having tabs open in Safari, and just that's as far as I'm probably going to take it for a conference or for a drive-by scenario. And so make that experience awesome.
Events and conferences is a perfect use case. Just thinking about that more, right? Like you go to the website and get a prompt saying, hey, are you coming to the event? Add this to your home screen and you'll always have the schedule. It's just, and then you get rid of it when you're done. And it doesn't matter that you don't have push notifications, or even the thing with, iOS will clear out your service workers if you don't use it for a few weeks. It doesn't matter. You're at a one-time event for a week or a weekend or what have you. Get all the info you need and have it locally without having to install a clunky pain in the butt application. Because like there are these white label conference apps and they're all terrible.
Yeah.
Just have a simple mobile website that has your content when you need it, even if you don't have a connection. Boom.
All right, you've convinced me, Nick. Make it a reality.
Yes, we're doing that.
Are you seeing in the talks that people are proposing anybody talking about PWAs or service workers? Or
Well, you heard that I read 0 of them.
Not in the 9 that I've gone over yet, but maybe.
And have I scanned the topics? No, I haven't done anything. I'm the worst. All right, parting thoughts as we wrap this up. Takeaways, action steps. Are we, perhaps many people still waiting for maybe a little bit better iOS support, or, go at it? What would be your parting words with regard to this topic?
I think they're interesting. It's definitely hard for me as a iPhone owning 20-something with high-speed internet access to like truly appreciate PWAs. So as a consumer, I'm not too interested in them, unfortunately. As a developer, I am interested in them as a way to make sure that all of my customers are getting resilient and reliable access to the product I'm building.
my parting thought is going to be based on our most recent conversation, most recent topic, which is we might be thinking too big. When we think about these complex applications, the support is not there to necessarily make those feel as good in a PWA as it is, in a native application. But when we think about these little micro cases like the conference website, event websites, things like that, suddenly we can have a dramatic shift forward from the status quo with something that is really a very minor change. So I think we should possibly start thinking about what are the other small examples that aren't these massive complex applications, but places where just having this ability to save some basic content to be in a non-network situation for a short time is going to be really valuable. Train schedules, events, other types of things where you have specific information you're going to want to access and you're not sure if you're going to be in a network scenario when you want to access it.
I think it'll get better. There will be more. I like that Google is pushing this kind of like you said, through standards rather than just kind of throwing everything at it like Windows is doing, Microsoft is doing. Pushing through standards means that there's a greater chance that a lot of the features that I would really like to see coming, things like push notifications, maybe geofencing along with that, and maybe more access to lower level APIs on iOS specifically, because that's what I have. I think it'll get better through those standards pushes.
Very cool. One last question coming in from the chat. Adam Stack asks, can you install from a particular URL as opposed to going to twitter.com, or maybe the answer is light.twitter.com if it's a subdomain. But can you have like a subsection of your website be a PWA, or does the whole thing have to be one?
Yes, you can. I think you can set what the top level of that is in the manifest, and then from there, you can the service worker can have access to that at that level, I think.
Let's call that a wrap, folks. Hey, if you're not listening live, well, we just don't know what's wrong with you, because this is a community party that we have every Thursday at lunchtime-ish, depending on your local time zone. So come hang out, changelog.com/JSparty. You'll find a live link there. Join our community Slack and Slack with us in real time. You can participate in the show, much like Corbin and Adam have this time around. But that's it for this week. So until then, I guess just keep partying on your own until we can party together.
Are you going to rap for us?
This is a rap, but I do not have a rap. The show is a rap. See what I did there? I have a poorly worded pun instead. Are you satisfied?
All right, thank you for tuning in to JS Party this week. Tune in live on Thursdays at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern at changelog.com/live. Join the community and Slack with us in real time during the shows. Head to changelog.com/community. And do us a favor, share this show with a friend, rate us on Apple Podcast, go into Overcast and favorite it. And thank you to Fastly, our bandwidth partner. Head to fastly.com to learn more. And we move fast and fix things around here at Changelog because of Rollbar. Check them out at rollbar.com. We're hosted on Linode Cloud servers. Head to linode.com/changelog. Check them out and support this show. Our music is produced by Breakmaster Cylinder. And you can find more shows just like this at changelog.com. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.